Hey everybody, Joe here, Psychedelics Today podcast. Thanks for listening. Today, Kyle actually interviews me, which is pretty cool because I got to interview him a while ago, and you guys should check that interview out as well. We get into my background, why I'm interested in doing this show, and some other cool stuff, some speculative discussion, other good stuff. So hope you enjoy it. Let us know what you think. You can find us and talk to us from our website, psychedelicstoday.com. Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, and Stitcher. You can find all those from psychedelicstoday.com. And reviews really help. If you want to leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher, it'll help us get more interesting and high-profile folks to bring to the table to discuss these issues and hopefully bring some new angles to the discussion. So, thanks again for listening, and see you on the other side.
Welcome. This is Kyle Buller. We are recording on Friday, April 15th of 2016, and I am here today with Joe Moore. I met Joe through the Breathwork community, and we've been working together on this podcast for the past few months, and trying to think about doing maybe some breathwork workshops in the future and teaming up to do some other things. So welcome, Joe. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for taking the other side. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're usually on the other side.
Pretty much always, yep.
Yeah. So, Joe, where you're from originally? I always get this confused. New Hampshire?
Right. Yeah, you got that right. I grew up just a little bit north of Lowell, Massachusetts in New Hampshire, right over the border there. Small town, and I grew up on like a not working farm that we made work a little bit here and there.
Cool. You guys did like a little bit of farming there?
Yeah, like once in a while we had cows, we had sheep, tons of chickens at one point. I think at one point we had 30 to 40 chickens, which is just chaos when they got out. It was pretty funny. I loved it, but one of my scariest memories was a big rooster chasing me down when I was like 5 years old, getting right in my face with its hooks. Yeah, that was exciting.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds awesome. Good childhood.
Absolutely. I think so.
Yeah. So I guess, how'd you get into the transpersonal stuff, the transpersonal realm? Like, what would you say like your first exposure to this was?
So I'm just thinking to make sure I'm saying the right thing. Typically what I say is I ran into this book. I had a pretty normal worldview going in, like through high school, whatever. You know, I couldn't say I necessarily believed in any kind of transpersonal phenomena for sure, like through high school. But freshman year of college, I took an intro to philosophy course. I went to college in the middle of New Hampshire in the White Mountains there. And intro to philosophy course, they assigned this book, Holographic Universe, where they discussed all of these. It was kind of like a survey of anomalous phenomena that indicated the Newtonian model of reality was kind of over. Like we can't talk in these terms anymore just because of all these findings. And there was a section on psychology, and it was this it kind of detailed in brief this episode Stan Groff had administering LSD psychotherapy to a heroin addict who had like a long traumatic family history. And it was the story of like the possession, like demonic possession, like devil thing. And he's trying to deal in his own framework with that. Like, how do you deal with this? You just sit with it and ride it out and then follow your training. And that's the solution. But, you know, it kind of blew my mind that kind of phenomena could come up through drugs. And I thought there was a lot more going on there. I think there was some mention of like ESP type stuff happening, and that kind of really blew my mind. Like, I think the girl in therapy knew some substantial personal details about Stan, and it really made him very uncomfortable. But I guess that's just part of it. You got to be comfortable when that stuff comes up, because maybe it will in the future. So for us as facilitators, we got to really know that kind of stuff. Anyway, that's how that was my first reference, and I was just like, "Is this for real? Am I getting jerked around? Is this philosophy professor crazy? So I go to the library and pull out all sorts of Groff books and start digging in. Shortly after that, I changed my major from computer science to philosophy and stuck with it and kept doing that curriculum. And I didn't do psychology because none of the stuff seemed that interesting that they were doing at my school. I was like, this philosophy stuff's pretty sweet. And it's like, I was the only person that graduated with my degree. So
really,
we got it. Yeah, that year.
Everybody else dropped out.
Well, there's just nobody there. There's people older than me and people younger than me. But yeah, I think the year after, maybe 2 people graduated.
Wow.
And I don't even think it's a degree at the school anymore because it just wasn't popular. But yeah, that was kind of my first exposure. And then I took probably a full 2 years before not getting over me being creeped out about going to a group alone in Vermont to do breath work. And I just went for it. I believe it was 2003. And 2003. It was pretty exciting to jump in. I had some really, really neat experiences. And
yeah. Who are some of your like influences in philosophy? Who are some of your favorite philosophers?
I got really drawn, more directed to Plato by teachers. Plato, Socrates was great. I really loved kind of the romantic aspect of philosophy here and there too, like Kierkegaard and his existentialism was pretty awesome to me. At the time, as many 20-somethings do, identify with existentialism hugely.
Yeah.
It's like it helps describe the situation kind of well. And yeah, so
kind of going through that identity crisis, trying to figure out who you are as a person. Nothing really matters.
And I'm trying to balance the philosophical stuff with the personal material, and at the same time, like getting drawn into this kind of spiritual world that one professor was pitching at me, like the transcendental meditation worldview, which is pretty much like a specific slice of Hinduism, in my opinion. I can't see that being argued. It's like yoga with a guru, but you're just doing meditation and climbing up the chain. I never really did it. I found some people who claimed to have the original teachings from before he updated it with some complex stuff, and it was just single syllable mantra meditation. Ram and Lam, and that's it. Ram and or Lam. You choose one.
That was the mantra.
That was it. And I didn't do it because they were charging like $2,500 at the time.
Oh, wow.
I think they still are.
Wow.
The concept is what you pay for, you value. So if you're willing to pay $4,000, you're going to value it as if it was a $4,000 thing. That's fine. That got him to build a city in Iowa and whatever else, a university, that kind of money. But
what's the university called?
What is it called? I think it's just Maharishi University.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I actually know somebody from my town that went there.
It's apparently a good business school and a good computer science school. I don't know too much more about it, other than it might be getting a little run down now.
Interesting. So have you had any experiences prior to philosophy or prior to breathwork that kind of got you into this realm of interest, that you just kind of went for philosophy and then that kind of broke you open and then you stumbled across Stan and entered into the breathwork realm?
Right. I think I was getting really frustrated in school, partying too much, as most college kids do, probably not sleeping enough. So it was like perturbing me just enough where I was like, okay, I got to do something. But no, I had never really done any psychedelics in college before breathwork. I was pretty straight-laced.
Yeah, or like never did any meditation or anything like that prior.
I had tried a bunch. I had done some yoga in high school, which I thought was pretty amazing, but not explicit meditation that I remember. Yeah, let's say no.
Cool. So like not having major experiences, what was it like going down to the Gibsons in Vermont? I'm sure that was kind of eye-opening.
It was eye-opening because everybody, for the most part, had been doing this stuff for a little while at that point. At least a year or two, which I thought was an enormous amount of experience at the time, which it's not. But
yeah, still new at that point.
Yeah, but it was a little nerve-wracking. I think I might have showed up late or something, or it was a smaller group because I got pulled down to. I showed up and I ended up eating dinner with the Gibsons at their house, not at the normal facility, and it was just like four of us at the table talking. Lenny found out I was a philosophy student, and we got along great from there, just getting into all of it. So that was pretty awesome. And jumping into breathwork, it was a little nerve-wracking. I had the feeling nothing was going to happen, kind of like you were saying, like, no.
Breathing? Yeah, all right.
So I went for it, and stuff did happen. I think I had some sort of multi-hour long void experience. So I don't think it was sleeping. And then I had the sense of like having all sorts of like Sanskrit letters on my fingers and toes. Somehow and then there was some large black like snake underneath me. I think, if I remember correctly, it was 13 years ago, but
yeah,
that's kind of what was going on. And it was pretty eye-opening. I didn't doubt that there was some value there. I said, okay, this feels like my inner machinery got moved forward a little bit. Something moved in a good direction, and that proved itself over the months following. Not anything dramatic. It felt like I matured a bunch and healed maybe some stuff. I can't really put my words to what that was at that point, but
yeah, sometimes they're just really subtle shifts.
It's vague. Yeah, subtle is probably a better word than vague, but yeah, it felt like it was important. But what that was, who knows?
Did you experience any of like the tetany or body sensations?
Huge amounts of tetany. So like that was a big barrier for me.
So maybe if people don't know what tetany is, it's when your hands clench up, muscles kind of constrict, and sometimes it can be pretty painful. I've never experienced it, but I've heard it can be pretty painful.
You're so lucky.
I think I've had like a mild form of it, but it never clamped up like the claw hands I've seen, and people look like they're in pain because of it.
I guess the technical term is carpopedal muscle spasms.
Yeah. And
it's just, you kind of clench up, you get a little tight, and you feel a lot of sensation in your hands. Sometimes you get it in your face, forehead. And you just work through it.
Just breathe into it.
Breathe into it is the trick, yeah. Amplify it. And then hopefully it's your portal to the other side, whatever that is.
So after that session, you had experienced some sort of subtle shift in your being, maybe life, and then that just kind of hook you in. You're like, whoa, this is pretty interesting. I want to try it again, or
yeah, because I had read most of the Groff material at that point. I thought that it was really important, and people weren't talking about it. I think I had seen a fair amount of mental illness from other people in my life. And I thought that this was a really good solution for mental disease. And I really wanted to see people, do stuff that was good for them all around. I think from an early age, I saw a lack of holistic thinking. And that's kind of why I saw this as a really good thing. I definitely was seeing the environmental collapse. I was seeing social justice issues. This was right around the time of the Iraq War. 2003 was when they dropped bombs this time around. And it was like March 2003. So I was in all these like philosophy classes about like, anti-war, peace movement, blah, blah, blah. And I was just amped up out of my mind, as a 23-year-old guy can get. I'm glad I'm not 23 with this election cycle happening, because I would go.
Oh my
ape.
God, it's a circus.
I would go ape, and I'm glad I'm removed and a little older. Thank God.
It's an absolute circus.
The emotional turmoil I would be having, it would be outrageous, and I can't believe what other people are probably feeling too.
Yeah.
It's hopefully they're not just feeling hopelessness. Hopefully.
Yeah.
But if they are, hopefully they get through it. Usually you do.
Hopefully we can push on through the other side. This is
Right.
just hopefully a bad experience that will turn into something good.
Keep breathing.
Yeah. Let's just keep breathing through the process.
And you'll probably be okay here. So, yeah. Tetany was interesting. Body sensations were interesting. Like, I don't really remember too much about that stuff from 2003. I wish I knew what year it was. It was probably 2010 or 2011 when I had my most intense breathwork session. Like, I have to say it was probably equally as intense as an ayahuasca session that I had a year or two before. Emotional charge, like I was gripped. It probably lasted 5 hours. Like, I remember being the last person in this house. Have you been to the place in Maine? I think it's like Wiscasset.
No, I haven't.
It's a huge room. Like, it could easily hold like 20 plus people. I think we had like 12. And everybody had finished like a while before me. And I think like 2 hours before me, and Lenny was pulling me out. And I'm like, has it really been 5 hours? It was just this emotional slide of me sliding down this like kind of like cosmic tongue or something. It was like a water slide or something, and everything outside that was flames and burning, and there's all sorts of emotional content left over about the world dying, stuff like that. So that was exciting, and I left kind of bummed out, but over the next few months I kind of think I worked towards integrating that. I was still in touch with Lenny and Elizabeth and stuff, and still facilitating some breath work, so I had a lot of positive.
You were facilitating around that time as well?
I think so, yeah. Boston Holotropic, I think we had started around then.
Okay.
And I'd been doing a lot of group organizing in Boston too, so I had a lot of like cool stuff going on to like help support me and help me change my position as a leader towards issues like that.
The group organizing, was that with the Evolver crew down there?
Right. So like Reality Sandwich and Evolver, like I reached out to the people organizing Evolver in, I think it was like Baltimore or like Atlanta or something, like before it was a real organization. They said like, oh, we got this cool thing happening in Atlanta.
One of those like up things.
Kind of, yeah. It was like a big full day long event. I said, oh shit, like that's exactly what I want to be doing near me. Like, how can I do that? Thankfully, I lived like a 45-minute drive into downtown Boston at that point, so I could set up events. I found some anarchist loft, and I guess not really anarchist, that's what I call it. Anarcho-socialist workers co-op loft where people had like worker space and a meeting space, and it was kind of neat. And so we hosted them in there. And, we had events from everything from like white magic to shamanism to how to grow your own fish, how to grow your own mushrooms at home, like just about everything you could. In that cultural milieu, like definitely some environmental stuff. So I got used to like public speaking that way, and finding guests and introducing guests. Even got Graham Hancock to come at one point.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I got to meet him and his wife, Santha. It was awesome. They did a great presentation. She's an amazing photographer. If you were to check out her stuff, Santha Graham or Santha Hoffman. Wait, what's his name?
Graham Hancock.
Thank you.
Little brain fart. It's totally cool.
Yeah. So it was awesome. It was a really huge growth experience, and I guess the culmination of that whole project was ayahuasca monologues we ran in Boston. Rented out this historic theater from the YMCA, I guess, in Cambridge, right on Mass Ave there. and we had people come. Chris Kilham, the medicine hunter from Fox News, came over.
I saw him down at Symposia last year.
Oh, cool! Did you get to meet him at all, or did you saw him talk?
I saw him talk. I don't think I introduced myself or chatted with him, but it was the one that I spoke at, so I'm not. We were all kind of mixing and mingling together, but yeah, he had an awesome story to share, and his talk was great.
Yeah, we had some great people there. A woman called herself the Love Artist. I forget her name at this point. She came and talked about it. Adam Ellenboss, the guy that wrote, he's an Evolver-related astrologer. What did he write? Fisher of Men, like ayahuasca as like a Jesus parable kind of thing. 'Cause he came from like a pretty strong Christian background, and he had like overcame some ferocious addiction with the help of ayahuasca. So we got into all that. In his background, and this girl Kara Trott came. She was a musician from Boston. It was just an awesome event. A bunch of people came. We had some great video. So a lot of that's on Vimeo right now. So if you search ayahuasca monologues on Vimeo, the high quality video is up there from at least Chris, if not a couple other people. Jonathan Talat Phillips, who wrote Electric Jesus. He's another guy. He's actually from Colorado, was living in Manhattan, kind of one of the co-founders of Evolver. He's currently kind of retired from Evolver, started his own thing in San Francisco now.
And you're not doing anything with Evolver?
No, not these days. They changed their name like a month ago to Bloom, but I really haven't been involved in probably 3 years now. Okay. At least, maybe even more. But I was doing some coordinating in Boulder for a bit too. Boulder is a tough market to crack.
Is it? Why is that?
I think number one, there's too much stuff happening all the time in Boulder. So you have to compete with everything, and
sometimes that's how I feel about Burlington sometimes.
It's tough. And there's an attitude in Colorado, it might be similar to Burlington, where you don't want to commit to something until the day of.
Right.
Because what if you have to miss a day, like a powder day, or like an awesome day on your mountain bike or something, or like your friends want to invite you rafting.
Yeah, that's like the same thing here. I mean, you get like all these cloudy days up in New England, and then you get one nice bright sunny day. You're like, I'm gonna go out and enjoy that because it's cold up here all winter. We get really bad cabin fever, and then once the summer rolls around, you only have like 3 months or so to really enjoy it, and you're not gonna go waste your day inside.
Yeah, I hear that. I'm thankful for where I live now because we have like 2 really long mud seasons, we call them.
Yeah, we have mud season up here too.
So we've got like probably a 2-month long one coming up, and then like after summer's over, it's about 2 more months where we're getting rain almost every day for like 5 minutes, but it messes with the trails, so you don't really want to mountain bike on wet trails, that kind of thing. But you can still hike. There's still plenty to do. It's just different situation. But, lower altitudes, it's always warm. Like you go to Denver, it's always like 100 degrees in the summer, 80 in the fall. Like
that high desert altitude kind of.
Yeah. Even in the winter, it's like highs of 60 midwinter in Denver. Not all the time, but often.
Yeah. Have you done anything down in those areas, or is it just, like you said, too hard to crack?
We ran we ran like a 5-part workshop. It was like acro yoga, astrology, breath work, and meditation, maybe 4 parts. And I think there was also like a shamanic episode too. So it was like a full day or a half day workshop on like Pearl Street in Boulder, which for you, it's like a sister city to Burlington. So it's like a spitting image of the walking mall you guys have. Almost.
Yeah, Church Street.
So, we did one there. I think I did some smaller ones in people's houses, smaller breathwork workshops. And I got to hang out and participate in a workshop in Denver at this like house. It was like a ranch house in Denver that was like a Buddhist monastery almost, like an urban monastery of sorts. And the guy who ran it invited Ken Sloan, like the former director of the Breathwork nonprofit, down to host, and he and his wife Petra put on a pretty cool workshop there. So I got to participate in that, and it was a really small situation, maybe 12 people total, 10.
Yeah.
It was sweet. I enjoyed it a lot. But yeah, minimal hosting of workshops in the Front Range, they call it. But up here, I'm starting to do a lot more. Probably got 3 under my belt in Breckenridge so far on the bigger scale.
Mm-hmm.
I'm about to buy some big speakers. I think I'm going to drop a lot of money on a speaker.
That's what I want to start investing. I have some mats. I like to get some really nice, high quality speakers. How'd you start getting into facilitating?
Lenny and Elizabeth had this at Dreamshadow, had this like awesome way of just saying, "Hey, do you want to try this? Like, can you help me with this body work I'm doing? Like, I need some assistance. Joe, do you want to try doing the relaxation this time? Do you want to lead the sharing? Do you want to lead the intro?" Like, and just this really awesome way of including me in the workshops more and more. And at a certain point, they started inviting me up to like help out for the whole weekend. And sometimes I wouldn't even breathe. Most of the time, I could sneak in a little bit. I would say every other time I was helping, I was doing some breath work too. I just wasn't acting as a normal participant. So it was pretty awesome. I really grateful for how they did that. And then Brian Bauer, who I hope we have on the show eventually, he and I kind of committed to starting up Boston Holotropic and doing workshops in Boston together.
Oh, you were great. Part of that startup,
right?
He wasn't doing that with Gene. It was kind of like you
Gene
guys
came
doing
down
that.
too. So Gene Wood, Faith Jones. Have you met Faith?
Yeah, that's Lenny's cousin, right?
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, out of Western Mass. She would come out. Lenny and Elizabeth would come down sometimes. Sometimes we would do them alone. But we did a bunch of workshops, and it was really cool.
So you've been involved with them for a while.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So at least 13 years at this point.
Wow. And how long before you started facilitating? Like how many years of breath work did you have underneath your belt before you felt you were ready to kind of step into that role?
I always felt really comfortable with what was going on in the sessions. I was never really perturbed. So I would say almost right away I was comfortable. Like I didn't probably do any till 4 or 5 years in.
Okay.
So maybe even 3 years. But I did some small sessions like in Southern New Hampshire and like solo and like yoga studios, short form. So stuff wouldn't get out of control or anything. And I could handle it on my own. And that was really cool, really fulfilling. I had some coworkers that we would do some regular sessions, just 2 of them. And that was awesome too. An awesome opportunity to help guide them through that stuff. And that was neat as a, probably 25 or 24-year-old guy at that point, working with women who were like 45 to 55, maybe even older. I don't really know how old they were, but it was awesome. I'm really grateful for their trust to let me to do that at that young of an age. It was awesome.
It sounds great.
Yeah. I'm really grateful for how it all worked out. Feel very lucky because I know a lot of people just wouldn't really take that leap. Maybe it's my technical background, like computer stuff, that like helped me too, because I wasn't ever really afraid to just throw up a website and say, "Here's what's going on."
Right.
Here's this event. Timed it right, kind of with Facebook and stuff too, so you could do all that kind of thing. So it just kind of a matter of time. It worked out awesome.
Yeah. What about like with the holding space? Do you ever kind of worry that something that you might not be able to handle might unfold, especially if you're kind of doing it by yourself? Or do you normally have sitters along with you?
Often sitters. And in terms of holding space, I think just being patient and not rushing the process, not being afraid to not say anything for a long time.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you just have to sit there for 15 minutes and maybe the thing resolves. Sometimes all it takes is a hand on the back and you chill for a while. And I remember in one of the Spiritual Emergency books, I think it was Spiritual Emergency, the white cover one with the flame in the center. I think it was Christina that wrote that one, Christina Groff, and it was all about just cases that came up when they were trying to help people through spiritual emergencies. And I remember at one point they just like kind of had this guy eat some meatloaf because he was going crazy for a while, and he's like, no, you got to have this, or like you really need to drink this soda. Like sugar, I think, has a big impact on like grounding foods.
Just something that grounds them.
And sugar's probably not the best, but it changes the blood sugar enough where you could have some more consciousness, more overt top of mind consciousness come to the foreground to take over some of the subconscious stuff to get you back to a more normal state where you could then start working on the stuff that came up for you. And I remember, what was it? I think it was some books about like, witchcraft in like the 1900s England, early 1900s, and people would sometimes get into those similar states and they would have to use sugar. So, and I knew a kid in college who was like going off the rails, kind of manic in a manic way. He wasn't eating. He was really like doing a heavy amount of yoga, probably 3 hours a day, at least. A lot of breath work, stuff on his own. And I think he was also eating some sort of like naturally occurring psychedelic plant all the time. So like, I really liked the kid. He was a philosophy student and he just like got a little loose. And at one point I was like, all of this is probably like the immediate trigger is not eating. Like if you were actually eating every day, you wouldn't be seeing that army of tiny men marching around you with like flags and horns and all that, like in the middle of class. Odds are pretty good. And also eating those plants, psychedelic plants every day probably didn't help either.
It probably doesn't help out. Yeah. I mean, that's something that I saw working with people with early episode psychosis was nutrition and sleep. I mean, two major factors. I mean, people aren't eating, drinking, they're not getting fluids, and sleep. I mean, sleep is so crucial, especially, you're up, you get like an hour of sleep maybe. There are people that just like never slept, and once they started getting a good sleep cycle, I mean, some of that stuff kind of resolved.
It really can. I can't say it's for everything, but
no, yeah.
That kind of stuff informed me being comfortable working with people and feeling comfortable holding space. Like I would see people in workshops get a little perturbed at what was happening for other folks. And I always kind of felt like a rock almost. It's like once in a while I'll tear up, but it's pretty infrequent about somebody else's material.
Right.
Yeah, especially when I'm in kind of like a facilitating role.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Sometimes when I'm in the sitter role, I feel that person's energy a little bit more and I might tear up. But yeah, facilitating, I mean, yeah, I feel like with the facilitating, you really need to like kind of have your own stuff worked out. You're not projecting it onto people and you're somewhat grounded.
There is a certain attitude you have to take on. It's like everybody is on their own kind of spiritual quest. And you have to allow them that. And step back your judgment. Like we're animals that judge. There's no way to like totally stop judging, but you don't have to let it impact how you're treating the person or think about the person fully. You say you're just a human. You're just another human that's hurting almost as much as everybody else is hurting. Let's just do the work. Even if you
just hold that
me,
space.
Yeah. Even if you say some nasty stuff to me, like let's just keep going and see what happens at the end. Usually it resolves.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Yeah, because I think sometimes, I think even in my work in the mental health field, people can take some of those things like really personally. And I have to remind myself that all the time, like this person is hurting, It's just sometimes it's a projection. Sometimes they don't mean it. And sometimes not my fault, but just stick with them. Yeah, it's really important wisdom.
Yeah.
So yeah, you also do some other podcasts, and you did some stuff with the cult material. Like, how'd you get into some of that stuff?
Same pathway as Groff.
So Groff, and then the breath work, and then did that kind of emerge out of the Evolver Like after Evolver?
I'd say no, before. So I found Groff, still doing my undergrad in philosophy at that point, and I ran into like this whole concept of the Renaissance and Renaissance magic, and like, oh, this whole yoga tradition has like a correlate in the West. That's very interesting. Let's look at that. That brought me to like interesting subjects on alchemy. Kind of also got there through Jung, a little bit, and I stumbled onto like Aleister Crowley's writings, and I was like, oh, who is this guy? Like, this is really controversial stuff. It's explicitly not Christian, so like it's interesting in and of itself in a Western context because everything's Christian over here. To the point where I was just like, ugh, like I can't do any more Christian stuff. It's just old at this point. Like, I don't mean to insult anybody, but I just like was not into it at that point. So yeah, religious background growing up, I probably went to church 3 times. Like when I was baptized, we cut there about what happened, how to get into the occult stuff. So my childhood background was just like, very little church. I stopped going when I was really young, and I think I had kind of probably a goth anti-establishment type phase when I was in high school. Not exactly. I didn't go full on, but it was close. And a lot of that message was about how establishment stuff is not necessarily of the highest value. Maybe we should think about it. So maybe that's what got me into philosophy a little bit. Just thinking about stuff at a younger age than maybe most people would, but not really substantial. It wasn't like I was 6 years old. It was like I was 17.
Right.
16. Yeah, that kind of stuff kind of set me off to think like, oh, is it possible Christianity is doing some bad? And that kind of stuck with me for a while and shaped a lot of my stuff. And I can't say that I don't feel the same right now. There was actually a pretty strong historical function for the Roman Catholic Church in keeping Europe alive, for lack of a better word, because it would have just been war-torn craziness, I think, otherwise. And, so there's probably some other good too. There was some charitable stuff, regardless of how brutal it got at times. The crusade against indigenous knowledge that the Jesuits persecuted across the Americas, across Asia, some really bad stuff happened. A lot of knowledge was lost. So that kind of stuff kind of pent up and like kind of stuck with me. So like ran into Crowley, and then I was like, oh yeah, like his message is a lot more discreet. It's all about finding out who you really are, using whatever means you need to, finding out what you were born to do, and do that at all, at any expense. Like really do what you need to do to be you, whatever you need to do that. So for instance, you really need to be a painter, so you do whatever you need to do to become a painter, even if it's something crappy. Like,
you're just playing the role.
Yeah, like you're a dumpster guy, and then you paint on the weekends, or you paint all night long and you barely sleep, like we talked about. It's kind of a Nietzschean concept too. Like, now that God is dead, what now? We find meaning for ourselves, and Crowley kind of made that a little more programmatic, using magic and yoga and whatever, meditation.
Interesting. I never got into Crowley. So I don't know too much about him.
To each their own. He's a Victorian magician who's really he's a rich kid. Kind of traveled all over the world. Did some really pioneering climbs on K2. Controversial, but he was there. And did some pretty cool rock climbing.
He left his crew there because he got a message about turning back, right?
No. He was pretty convinced that they were making big errors in terms of reading the avalanches, and he decided to turn around or like stay put, and a bunch of other people went forward and got killed by the avalanche that he kind of said was going to happen. And this is late 1800s, so avalanche knowledge wasn't that great. So doing big mountain expeditions were even more dangerous than they are now. Which were already pretty dangerous. So some people died there. Just the fact, like how he was intellectual, how he was into poetry, how he was into art and sports and whatever else, all this kind of like a Renaissance man of sorts. I was curious. And he has this other message that's not just pray to God all the time and and you were born a sinner, and you will always be a shitty entity. Like, oh, you can actually be an awesome entity, and existence is pure joy. Like all this kind of messages that is total opposite of the Christian message. Oh, yeah, I'm into that. So that kind of hooked me, and I started like meeting people, started reading a bunch of books, started this podcast, get access to authors to interview people.
And what's that podcast called? Because it's still up. You still have a page for it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. 52 episodes right now. Occult Sentinel. It's on iTunes. Some reviews, what is it, 4.5 stars or something like that now. I think people gave me a lower rating because I stopped doing them for a while. Can't believe this is
consistent.
Dead. Giving them a 3 stars. Like, whatever. I don't care. It's cool that you gave me a rating regardless. But it was awesome. I really learned a lot. I met a ton of people. One of the better parts was getting gazillions of free books from publishers. Whatever I wanted in their catalog, they would always just send me for no cost because I was hopefully going to interview their author. So,
free advertisement.
Absolutely. Yeah. So all that stuff kind of played out, and I did stuff from like Western esoteric traditions to like Kabbalah, magic, alchemy, to voodoo priests that studied in Haiti, kind of American guys that studied down there in Haiti. People that were into like totemism, so like, becoming animal spirits and communicating with animal, plant, mineral spirits, stuff like that. It's pretty awesome. Learned a lot, and kind of got involved with some groups like Crowley's OTO and this other one, Fraternitas Lux Occulta, kind of coming out of this other guy, Paul Foster Case, kind of very different trajectory than Crowley in lineage, but roughly similar content about self-development using Western methods. So yeah, I even got to talk to some psychedelic people, writers on those subjects too, which is really cool to talk to people about ayahuasca and whatever else.
Who did you get to chat with?
Rockraz.
Oh, he did the video Aya, right?
Yeah, and he's really neat guy. High energy, really great attitude. Who else did I get to interview? I don't remember offhand, but yeah, they're all up there. But it was super fun. I learned a ton and networked a ton, and really happy I did it. And I hope to keep doing it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Like just being able to talk and learn. I mean, that's probably the most valuable thing. I think that's awesome.
Absolutely, and like stuff like Joe Rogan, like him coming. Coming out of the closet as a pseudo-intellectual of sorts. Who knew this meathead from Boston that was in martial, like Taekwondo and comedy
and consciousness and
yeah, who knew he had all this stuff to share with us?
Yeah,
he's talking about almost every subject on his show. I should probably do something similar. Like, it sounds sweet. Why can't I do it for the $10 investment I have to make? It's cheaper than going out to eat, so why not?
That is true. You're really into this like mysticism, transpersonal stuff, but then you also have a podcast on permaculture, right?
Right. So permaculture is an ethically based design system primarily purposed towards developing human habitat that can last perpetually, if not forever, if we take care of it right. Well, forever till the sun goes out, or an ice age comes, stuff we can't stop. But yeah, it's all about how do we create synergistic relationships between elements in our system that decreases the amount of overall investment we need to put in it in terms of like human time, external capital from your job. How do we just get this thing to roll and be almost, zero cost and make money off of it usually, or at least, make food, which then cuts back your need to make money. And it can be applied to lifestyle design, to businesses, to nonprofit, like business structure in general. Like there's a lot of stuff going on in businesses that this toolkit can apply to sort out problems.
And how'd you get into researching or studying that? How'd you get interested in it?
I think it was a reference at Horizons, actually, the Psychedelics conference in Manhattan, where
Cool.
Daniel Pinchback kind of started mentioning the term, and I should probably look up this term because it sounds like exactly what I'm thinking about. So he was talking about these off-the-grid psychedelic permaculture facilities where you're pretty much doing self-development and spiritual research all the time. So that kind of set me off on this path to learn more about it. And it took me probably 6 years to take my permaculture design class in Denver after hearing that. But I eventually did it. It's not cheap, but it's like 14 long days of classes. And you learn a lot, about 72 hours of course curriculum time at the very least. Usually there's more.
I have a friend that is about to sign up for a course like that for the summer.
Super worth
it. PDA or something like that?
PDC, Permaculture Design course.
PDC.
Yeah. And they oversell it a little bit. It's totally worth it, but it is the intro level. It is the gateway to that world. It's you don't, even after you take the course, you still don't know much because there's so much to learn, because it talks about everything from soil health to beneficial relationships, vegetables and plants, like megafauna, like how do you cycle large animals through a system to smaller and smaller animals and do that all for the health of the plot of land, that kind of stuff. And everybody else, not just the land, but make sure everybody's happy and needs are met. So yeah, that concept of permaculture meets spirituality always really spoke to me. And I really wanted to see like clusters of cloisters, almost like a modern monastery. People studying whatever they're into at that one. So like, maybe it's just straight up yoga. Maybe it's a conglomerate practice of yoga, tantra, psychedelics, or breathwork. Maybe it's this one is like shamanism and permaculture. And I would really like to see a network of those kind of things loosely affiliated pop up all over the country or world. It would be really neat to see how those would develop, especially if they were intelligently designed.
Yeah. And I love that idea just for the fact of, I think you're really into integration, but like you have a bunch of these powerful experiences, and what do you do with it? And I think like sometimes it is implementing it and doing stuff with the earth and creating these self-sustaining systems. I mean, sometimes that's the messages that I get from some of my transpersonal experiences, and it's cool to have something like hands-on like that to do.
Right. One of the recurring messages in Groff is all about we're in an ecological crisis, and one of the few tools we have are these sacred technologies that could shift people's worldviews substantially towards a more ecological, lighter treading culture. Like, we don't necessarily need all these coal plants. Maybe we do like really small micro hydro electric facilities, like not damming a huge river. Maybe you're generating just a small amount of power off the rain from your roof. And the cost on micro solutions is very small. The amount of electricity you get is pretty small, but maybe you don't need all that electricity you're using in the first place.
Right.
Same thing with fossil fuels. But there's a tendency in permaculture and a lot of spiritual worlds to regress. Not really regress. It's this notion, like McKenna's notion of the archaic revival, where I feel like a lot of modern stuff gets rejected when there's still a lot more value. You've probably seen it where people are like, like yoga is exclusively where it's at. Western medicine is totally stupid. Zero reason to pay attention to that or even participate, even if you're sick.
I just read this satire article probably about an hour before we started chatting. It was like, new research confirms that internet commenters are actually smarter than doctors. And it was just like, oh my God, yep. And then they're saying like the conspiracy theorists, like I've watched like 1,000 hours of like this theory of the anti-vaccinations. Like, how many hours did you watch, doctor? Or like how many hours of research have you spent doing this?
Right. And being a doctor is tough. Like they go through 4 to 6 years of education, like post undergrad or whatever, and that's when they spend time studying for the most part. And then you practice. You don't necessarily spend a ton more time getting educated on everything that's out there that could be getting you sick or whatever. It's a tough.
Right.
It's an interesting career. It's not for everybody, and it's like I think it's very helpful, but at the same time, there's so much literature out there, and they can't keep up. It's an information glut.
Yeah, you really can't. Yeah. I mean, it's a huge time commitment. It's money. I mean, I can't imagine. Sometimes I hear stories of like doing these residencies, like especially when you first start off, you got to do these like long hour overnights. I'm like, oh, no, thank you.
I was listening to Joe Rogan yesterday with Rick Doblin, actually. Did you know that in 2 days it's the 30th anniversary of MAPS being in existence?
Yeah, the 17th. They're having a huge dinner out there.
That's awesome.
In Oakland.
They're live streaming.
I think they're live streaming it. Yeah, Symposia is going to be live streaming.
That's cool. And so Rick Doblin's dad was a doctor, a pediatrician, and during the residency, he admitted to Rick like years later that he and a bunch of friends in the residency program were doing meth to just stay awake.
Wow.
Yeah. Like it's probably 50s.
Yeah, they've changed the laws. I mean, they I think definitely shortened hours, because I was just talking to somebody and they said like when their dad was in school, yeah, they were doing like 100-hour-week residency type things, and it's like, how do you, like, I would not want like a doctor taking care of me, because I think about myself in the mental health field. Like when I'm burnt out, like I can't hold space for people, and it's not healthy. I mean, people's lives.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
I talked to somebody not that long ago, a doctor, about it, and he was like, well, the amount of time required to get a doctor spun up to be effective is pretty huge, and that's why residencies are so brutal. You want to have X number of contact hours, and they try to squeeze it into the smallest period of time possible instead of stretching it out a little bit.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's tough. But yeah, permaculture I think is great. I've only probably done 7 or 9 or 10 podcasts there, but I did some really cool video with the guy who runs the Permaculture Institute in North America. Is that right? No, just the Permaculture Institute in different groups. Scott Pittman out of Santa Fe, great guy. I learned a ton from him, and it was just a great experience. Spending time on a place he's lived for a long time. And he learned directly from some of the people who founded the field. So it's pretty awesome. And a lot of other people who've been around forever, some of my own personal teachers I got to interview, and even people I haven't met, which is great.
Yeah.
To meet them.
That's
visually.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So yeah, we touched a lot on like the breathwork, the evolver stuff, some of your interest, but we didn't really get to touch base on some of the psychedelics, like
right. So
do you have any thoughts or like your own opinions, like what got you into that? Any personal experience, or what interests you in this field of psychedelics or psychedemia?
Yeah, so like talking about that stuff it's always hard to talk about, but I think reading a lot of the Groff material about the early psychedelic research kind of proved to me that beyond a doubt this stuff is effective for treating certain conditions. More effective than a lot of other treatments that are underway. Like, I had an argument with a psychiatrist I met out here warming up at this warming hut on the ski hill, and he was there. I'm like, oh, what do you do? Oh, you're a psychiatrist. Cool. So I get into talking about PTSD, treatment-resistant PTSD. No, we have great treatments for PTSD. You don't really need to worry about treatment-resistant PTSD. It's like, well, what about soldiers? Well, you just got to get those soldiers shortly after the trauma, and it's no problem. Well, yeah, but the trauma's 7 years old, and you never touched it before. How are you going to treat that? That's not, and I got all amped up on him about that. Are you familiar with MAPS? Are you familiar with their MDMA psychotherapy research? Or do you know anything about the LSD work? He's totally ignorant of it because people just aren't talking about it in that world yet. It's coming, but it's
well, did you see the new research that was just put out about the neuroimaging of LSD. I mean, I've been
Right.
watching it pop up on like yoga forums and stuff like that.
It's coming up all over the place. It's really, I think that's a big deal. I don't know why it took so long to do that. Was that like the David Nutt stuff in England?
Yeah, David Nutt, Robin Carhart Harris,
Right.
their
Like
team over at the Imperial College of London.
that, I remember them setting that up like 3 years ago that they were going to do that. And it's interesting to me that they took this long to release any images.
Yeah.
They probably just wanted to get their data lined up appropriately before releasing it. But
Right. When I was out at the Psychedelic Science Conference, they had just completed and they were presenting their fMRI studies on psilocybin.
right.
And then I'm guessing they just started up the LSD a couple years after that, or a year or so.
Yeah, it's huge. I think that's a huge breakthrough for it. But why? What got me interested? It was probably explicitly the Groff material.
Graph material and
And,
breath work, I'm guessing.
Breathwork too. I was like, so breathwork gets all these corners of your mind. What else? What might psychedelics get? And you know, when is it the right time to do a psychedelic drug for healing? Like what makes the appropriate situation? Those kind of questions really got me interested in it, and I think the first psychedelic drug I ever did was ayahuasca. So I went right for the big gun. And
Didn't even dip your feet in anywhere. Just go right into the deep end.
yeah. And I have to say it was probably one of the most intense and amazing experiences of my life. It was, 4+ hours long. It was done with some shamans from South America, maybe 20, 30, there's probably 30 other people in the room in a big circle in like an old church. Wow. It was pretty amazing. And but from all of my experience in breath work, I really wanted something else other than, okay, we're done. See you later. Like I wanted something more. So I like hung out and spent the night, and then like hung out with people the next day who had like a long history in the stuff. And that helped a little bit, but it was just it's really disconnected from anything I'm aware of in breath work. Why are you guys just running away? What's going on here? Whereas in breathwork, you hang out for a while talking about what's going on, what came up, how to deal with it going forward.
You guys didn't have like a closing circle, or you guys didn't really talk about stuff. It just kind of ended, and then that was it.
Not the way I wanted it to happen. It was a like there was some music, some people sang some songs, some people played guitar. Outside, some people had these like horns or something, like like the antlers that blow like a like that kind of thing was going on. But there was some ritualistic stuff, but it was not in English. So it's like, how do you really relate to that as a English speaking person? So it was a little lacking. I think there's room for improvement, and I think that's going to happen. There's this indigenous knowledge is great, but there's a lot of knowledge that the West has too. That's really impressive and really helpful for people. So I think that's going to go a long way. Yeah, and I think I've got to say I felt amazing for probably a good 6 months after that.
Wow.
I don't.
Did you go in with like an intention or something that was like bubbling up in you that you were looking to clear out?
Probably. Yeah. There's all sorts of life stuff happening. I was going underwater in real estate, stressed out at my job. All sorts of bad stuff was going on. Maybe this will sort me out, and breathwork isn't yet. So let's try something else, something in addition. I think it's always important, like in a therapeutic context, one modality isn't necessarily enough for the individual.
Right.
Maybe you need physical therapy and acupuncture, physical therapy and a massage here and there to sort out your injury. It's a multimodality kind of world I think we're living in now, and that people have to be aware of that. The doctors might not go there because that's not how they were trained, but we're empowered with a lot of data. And the indigenous people are just getting there. They're just getting access to this stuff now. And it might take a little while for them to start pulling on these healing resources to to help inform their practice, especially when working with a Western audience.
Right. Yeah. Something I've heard about, I don't have any experience going down to South America, but something I've heard through, people that have was that, yeah, sometimes it's like the ceremony ended and then like, the shamans didn't really like help. Maybe because there's a language barrier, like they didn't help with the integration thing. They're like, all right, yeah, see you later. Like that's it. And then people are kind of left from, like, what the hell was that? But
different barrier.
Different cultures. I mean, maybe in their culture, they're just used to that stuff and it's not a big deal. Whereas like we come from maybe a more sensitized culture and maybe a lot more people are sensitive to it and they want to work with it and they need a little bit more guidance.
Right. It's very true. And I think it's important to think of that stuff. And maybe it's that we're kind of medicalizing the spiritual as a culture. Like, I don't know that that's a problem. It's probably a problem for science to deal with, but, for users, I don't know that it's really a problem, especially if we're getting a benefit. So I do want to circle back and say that there was somebody that was having a hard time getting out of the experience. I think it was probably about 6 hours in, and the shaman was still working with this lady who couldn't really come back. It took her a while to come back. She had to sleep it off, and she was good in the morning. But that can happen. It just like in breath work, you can kind of space out for a little while and require some extra work to come back. Like same thing can happen with substances. And not everybody's going to have the same reaction because these things are pretty unpredictable.
Right. Yeah. Everybody reacts differently.
Because of all my breath work, the person I sat down next to kind of assumed I was an old pro. No, not really. This is pretty terrifying, but it's no more terrifying than like every other breath work session, I guess.
Right.
But at this point, to be honest, it would take a lot to get me to do ayahuasca again. I think I want to do it again in the future. It's a hard step.
Was it the purging? Was it the visions, the body sensation?
It's the anxiety. The session had like a ton of anxiety in the first 10, 30 minutes. Time doesn't really work normal in those situations.
Right.
But tons of anxiety, fear, and the purging was actually amazing. I had no problem with that. And just the intensity of surfing that wave of emotional content for hours, with the fear that if I slip up, I'm just going to get demolished. So I better stick with it. Demolished by emotional content, really.
Right.
I should have known. I could have dealt with whatever came at me, but it was just a lot of work. And I don't know. I would probably want to meditate like daily for like 6 months before going at it again, which I should be doing anyway. But I'm going to need some prep if I ever choose to do it again.
Right.
In short, it's like stressful thinking about it often. But yeah, it was really amazing. A lot of really cool stuff came up. I think I saw some transpersonal entities, communicated with some dead grandparents, stuff like that.
Wow.
Pretty amazing.
Sounds awesome.
It was really helpful for a lot of things. It's just so much happened. And it's like, I've probably only accrued more, which I think maybe some of the tension is that I only scratched the surface. It's like the most intense thing ever, and I only really
scratch the surface.
Yeah, like there's so much more. I think everybody has this. There was one line from Daniel Pinchbeck where he said that there's vast continents of unknown, unexplored territories out there in the mind, where just waiting to be explored by anybody. And there's a lot of ways to explore them. Magic, yoga, meditation, psychedelics, breathwork. There's all these modes we could use to explore, and there's just so much value left out there.
Yeah.
I think I carry a fair amount of work stress, and I don't know, anxiety for whatever reason. Who knows?
As most people do in this culture.
Yeah. So like the next time I would say like really did a psychedelic drug is mushrooms, and I had boatloads of anxiety for I would say at least 50 minutes. It wasn't like a nightmare situation. It was fine. Just out in the mountains somewhere, and stuff kind of cooled off after a bit. Thankfully, I was with some really good friends. That was the one time I was, I'm really against this whole doing drugs in uncontrolled situations thing. But I was at a point where I really thought I needed it, and it was with a group of people who I really appreciated and trusted. So I was like, okay, we're all doing this with some sort of intention and therapeutic process type deal. So let's go for it. And by the end of the night, I felt amazing. Everything was magical again. Mushrooms, I don't believe, last as long. The afterglow doesn't last as long as ayahuasca, but it's still pretty helpful for people.
Yeah, I mean, I think I talked about last time had a huge benefit for me.
Yeah, brought you back.
Yeah, it brought me back, and I'm really interested in trying ayahuasca at some point. But I get this message where it's like, you don't need to do it right now. After having like a near-death experience and some of these really powerful experiences, I just get this message of like, you're doing the work. The work isn't always in those transpersonal realms. Sometimes the work is actually in life, and it's about bringing it back and then playing with the magic in life. I think we take it and we go, oh no, the magic is only when we ingest like these substance. But I mean, when you're able to bring it back, I mean, it's out there in front of you all the time. You just got to be willing to work with it and take the risk of nudging it around, pushing buttons in real life, which can be terrifying because then it's like real life consequences. But
yeah, how do we make our lives more extraordinary and magical through these things we learned?
I think that's the real work, is pulling it back. And
especially when you're not in using it in a super medicalized context. Like say you had some serious trauma to deal with, like you're just trying to work on that more than bringing, well, maybe that is equivalent to bringing magic back into the world. Like you're sorting out your life, which really could be magic, sorting out your mind in really serious ways, which that's serious work, and that's probably could be considered extraordinary, going from like a nightmare mind to like a normal one. That gradient is enormous. It's like you're living in hell every day to now you can live a little bit above purgatory. That's a huge difference. If you put it on a gradient scale like that. And then sky's the limit, I guess, for what we the potential for the human is just so amazing. That's what I keep coming down to. Like what is it that makes me want to keep doing this work? Is that I love people. It's like when I see people open up and start learning about themselves, start sharing for the first time, start feeling safe for the first time in a breathwork workshop. It's like I've never felt this safe in my life. I've heard that at least a few times. That kind of stuff. It's like I can't believe I'm saying this to a group of people. Like those kind of things I think are amazing. They're absolute magic in action. And it comes back to that archaic revival thing where we're like kind of recreating this tribal situation in breathwork that we have evolutionary or biological resonances to, that just recreate this amazing feeling and safe space for expression and growth. It's really, really cool. And with all of the ills in the world, I see a plethora of solutions. And that gets me excited, gets me through most days, knowing that there's loads and loads of people working on all of the issues out there. And they might try to convince you theirs is the best issue to work on. You never know. Like, maybe that's true, but you didn't convince me. Like, I think ecological crisis, generally speaking, and the current state of the human condition in the modern world, the modern capitalist world. I don't want to say there's necessarily anything wrong with capitalism, but there's issues, and the way the human psyche relates to it can be problematic. Pierce put up this article the other day about coercion. Like civilizations without coercion have substantially less mental illness. And it's
Interesting.
like, how are we being coerced? It's like you're being coerced to get good grades in school, getting coerced to be quiet and sit still all day, which is torture on a little child monkey. Like, could you imagine a chimp sitting still for 8 hours a day for a reward of like some snacks? Like, it's absolute torture, and it just wouldn't happen.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that because recently at my job, I was working with a client that went to like a, not a very well-developed country, a poor country, and they lived a pretty simple life. And I'm working with teenagers, so this person is relatively young, and they were exposed to our culture, then to a very simple culture for about a year or so, and they came back and they're super depressed. And actually last night I was talking to them and I was like, yeah, like how is that like coming back here? And they're like, it's just maddening. Like, I don't understand why people live like this. And they were saying how, like, in the other culture that they were with, there's just like this sense of community. They felt safe. They didn't have to worry about too much stuff. And things were just simple. I mean, you come back here and it's just like it's a circus. You got to like just do a million things to just keep afloat, and sometimes it's not even practical. Sometimes it's just like you're working to make money to work, to pay for your transportation there and pay to eat and da 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 da. It's it's kind of crazy.
So two things there. I met a guy in Egypt who is a scuba diving instructor who had his master's in electrical engineering and realized he just couldn't make it work. Like he was having like a negative income after a couple of years, like just trying to commute there and back and afford a car and all that kind of stuff. So he just dropped out and became a scuba diving instructor on the coast, which is awesome for him. And then I have some friends that are soldiers, and I guess they, while enlisted or even afterwards, consider America the postal exchange. So it's pretty much like whatever you want at any time you can have for very low consequence, if none. Whereas when you're at war, it's like absolutely minimal resources, and it's pretty intense, totally different. So like when they hear people complain about mundane issues, they're just like, are you serious? Like you're going to complain about that? Why? And why is that such a critical issue to you? And that has to be a big thing for reintegrating into society for soldiers. It's got to be incredibly difficult.
Oh my God. I don't even know what that would be like.
Yeah. After seeing the worst and sometimes the best of humanity as a soldier, coming back to mundane civilization, it's got to be just entirely alienating. So
how do you function?
No idea. So this guy I met the other day, I presented to the local Rotary Club, and a guy from Florida who used to live here for 20 years was talking about this group that he's been running for 13 years, I think, called Wounded. It used to be like Wounded Warriors, but it's not Wounded Warriors. It's like they changed the name to Wounded Heroes very recently to not conflict with the real Wounded Warriors. It was like a 4-word title, not just like 2. But
right.
He does family therapy exclusively. They come here and they ski for a week and they do couples therapy, family therapy.
Whoa, that's cool.
And and you're only allowed to come if you're married with a kid of 6 years old and higher. So that really restricts it. They get hundreds of applicants, and I might actually talk to him about doing some breath work with some of that audience.
Cool.
And I think that would be really neat. I have a lot of sympathy for soldiers. There's a lot. It's a very complex issue, war and soldiers reintegrating. But I have a ton of compassion because they were just kids when they signed up. They didn't really know. And then there's no way out.
Yeah.
You have to do what you signed up for.
I guess early on for me, like I caught up in some of the conspiracy stuff and being against war. I always had that like negative thing against soldiers. I'm like, who the hell would even sign up for that? And then, after knowing people that went over there, my compassion has totally shifted. I'm like, geez, like just kids going over there, and yeah, you might have signed up thinking you're doing like a great service, and then you go over there and you realize, oh wait, this isn't what I really wanted to sign up for, and this totally, I mean, that's traumatizing. I mean,
Rick,
just doing things against your will, your morals, like, ugh.
And shutting down your emotions for years at a time. So you have to learn how to have emotions again. It's complex, man. Rick Doblin on the Rogan show I listened to the other day or yesterday raised this kind of horrific or assholey question that he gets asked once in a while, whereas like, you know, if war is so bad, are we lowering the total cost of war so that more war happens? Like, because psychological damage is a cost of war, and we are lowering the cost of war in a strict manner of speaking. I don't think that argument holds any water. I think that's like, are you going to really not treat somebody for the rest of their life because they did that?
Right.
Like, really?
Right.
There's no medical treatment whatsoever. Like, no. Like, that level of suffering should be cured.
Cured, yeah, definitely.
Back, if you do the MDMA psychotherapy, you're going to come back a more compassionate person. Like, I think almost unequivocally. There's probably, I don't know, 20, what is it? Is it like 85% effective?
Yeah, 83 or 85. I always get the number confused.
Yeah, so it's not 100%, but it's still pretty substantial.
I mean, that's better than like being on Prozac and stuff like that, you know?
And they're even treating exclusively people who haven't responded well to conventional therapies. 85% with, or 83% with treatment-resistant patients. That's pretty awesome. It's killer, really.
Yeah, we had Tony Macie come up to the History of Psychedelics course that I did with Lenny, and he's been on some of the videos recently. You know, there's a Vice article. He was part of I think, one of the early clinical trials.
Sure.
And somebody in the class asked him, like, hey, how many times did you do this? And he was just like, I only took the medicine once. And everybody was like, once? And he was saying that his CAPS score was around like 87, and then it stayed around 12 for the past few years. I mean, something to hear a story like that is just unbelievable.
What does the CAPS score mean? So I don't know. Right. People probably also don't know.
I don't know what it stands for, but it's the clinical assessment for PTSD. So you'd take a test, or the clinician or psychologist would assess you, and then however you rate on that.
It's probably a scale of 100, and he was at 87, and he got it lowered to 12.
Over 50, you'd be diagnosed with PTSD. So I mean, out of 100, 87, that's pretty high.
Yeah, and then to 12 off of one dose. That's because that's unique, because the current method is like 3 sessions with a ton of therapy, talk therapy before and after. So that's interesting. So yeah, it's actually really huge. And the other thing that Rick mentioned is people throw this at him. Like, so say for example, we're 60 years in the past, and you had the opportunity to do therapy on Nazi soldiers who were like running a concentration camp. Would you do it? And it's like, excuse me? Like, are you really going to throw that question at me? Like,
wait, somebody asked Rick that question?
They're posing that kind of questions at psychedelic psychotherapies to accentuate even further that last thing about soldiers, like lowering the cost of war. Wow. So it's like trying to equivocate like Nazi Germany to the U.S. It's like, no, it's not really going to fly, man. I don't even think you should answer that question.
No, that's absurd.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know. There's this whole concept of war crimes that we got to really take seriously. But if you're a prisoner and you might be able to come out and actually shed light on the world in the future, you should probably be allowed to do that. You don't want to throw everybody to Azkaban.
Right.
Forever? Really? No. If you can do some really cool therapy to really turn somebody around, you probably, should consider that as an option.
Yeah, I mean, they sacrifice their lives, like, well, why not treat them? I mean, it's a huge sacrifice. Your entire life, you just gave your time to go overseas to fight a battle, whether you agreed or not. And I mean, yeah, you should be rewarded, and I think the the least you could do is treat them.
Oh, what was the number? $6 billion in disability payments annually to PTSD soldiers with PTSD.
Wow.
And that's just the disability. That's not even the therapy dollars.
Yeah.
So, like, it sucks to put a number on it, but it gives you a little bit of context for what we're working with currently. Holy moly. Really?
Yeah.
So, like, these kind of numbers kind of really pushed me over the edge to want to take the subject more seriously. I considered going back to get a counseling degree. So like you, we could do work with people in a clinical context. And I don't really know where I stand on that currently. I think I'm probably going to pass for a little while and see where my life develops. But I want to really do a lot more breath work. I would like to take this podcasting thing more seriously with this project, Psychedelics Today, and really kind of push eco psychology type stuff. Not that I don't want to totally discount academic stuff. Like, academic work and degrees has super awesome value, but I don't necessarily feel like I'm the person that needs or wants that right now.
Right.
Yeah. And I love a couple PhDs. I feel like that kind of takes me out of the game for 8 years.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a question that I was going to ask, or maybe wrap up with, is like, what are you trying to synthesize with all this? Like, what do you think, like, your future is looking like? I mean, it sounded like you just kind of described it a little bit, but
pushing experimentalism a little bit, pushing ecology as much as I can, and conscious design of lifestyle and landscape, and also just working with people one-on-one in a breathwork context. I find doing breathwork with people really rewarding, and the relationships that develop are amazing. I just feel like there's a lot of magic there, a lot of value there, and the world needs it. And I think giving people their power back by giving them these allowing them to have these experiences without using drugs is huge. It's legal. It's a very similar experience, almost as therapeutic, if not as therapeutic. Like, there's huge reasons to do it, and I think the world needs it. We need mental health, and we need planetary health, and those are the kind of things I'm going after. I think there's room for some more esoteric stuff, like, allowing people, if they want, to explore alchemy, explore magic, all that kind of stuff. Whatever geographical tradition they choose to draw from, there's room to allow that and help them experiment there. Life's just amazing gift, and not everybody's the same. So we have to just encourage people to go for whatever it is. Like, oh, you really want to be a voodoo priest? Like, go for it. Like, figure out what that is, and see if you can do something cool with it. Maybe you're trying to make a gazillion dollars doing it, or maybe you're really just trying to heal people and play priest.
Yeah.
And there's a role for that, for sure. And I just want to help enable people to live the life they might really want. How to figure out what that is there's no way to really be sure, I don't think. But you can experiment and shift till you find what it is you want.
I think it's something that you said, just giving power back to people, because maybe some people just don't even feel their own power. They feel like they lack it. It's been taken away. Maybe they never had it to begin with. And I think, exploring yourself, doing this inner work kind of helps you regain some of that power and makes you realize, oh yeah, I'm worth something. Like, I am a human being that's worth something, and I can do something in this world. And,
so, like, the counterexample is the pinnacle of existence sleeping well every night, being able to go out to Cheesecake Factory 3 times a week and drive your mid-grade BMW? Is that like the extent of life? That's it? That's all? Or is there a lot more? I tend to think that the vision for humanity doesn't necessarily fit into like a small consumer capitalist mold. I think there's a lot more variety here than people understand, and it's not everything's about economics and being a functionary in your life. Just blindly driving your meat suit around. We can we can become a lot more aware. And Duncan Trussell had this whole story when I saw him the other day at the stand-up place in Baltimore. He saw the Dalai Lama while he was on mushrooms, and
oh my God.
And the Dalai Lama's like closing line was, "We can always afford to be kinder." I'm like, yeah, does it really get too much more simple than that? Like, it's great to be kinder. I think that's huge and really, really amazing statement. But we also can choose to be kinder to ourselves and really let our hearts sing. Mm-hmm. We don't have to live these really depressing lifestyles. We have this amazing opportunity right now to live, and we should be doing it. And it's kind of like a synthesis of everything up to this point that I've studied, and it's kind of where I'm at. There's so much amazing stuff left.
Yeah, it's just still exploring, still trying to figure it out.
Like science, extreme sports, people exploring. I think we're a couple decades out from sending satellites to Alpha Centauri. I don't know if you saw that the other day, like our closest star.
No.
Yeah. It was a really cluster array method of sending satellites out there using a laser to power them. Laser from Earth or a satellite or something.
Cool.
Excuse me? Really? Awesome. Like, I didn't think we were going to get to Pluto anytime soon, but apparently I'm wrong.
We could.
Yeah, it's this concept, constant acceleration. You're eventually going to be hitting a speed close to light speed. It's pretty awesome. I don't know how close to light speed, but just constantly accelerating. So eventually you're going to hit a pretty enormous speed and see what happens. So there's so much amazing stuff happening. Health, stem cells, like aging is, we might live to be 250 years old. You never know. And you just got to stay in love with life. Otherwise 250 is going to be ridiculous. You know,
ridiculous. Yeah.
I already worked for 50 years. This is awful.
I definitely do not want to stay in a crippled body for 250 years. I hope like we get the technology where like you can regain something, you feel a little bit youthful, but I don't know if I'd want to live a very long life like that. Maybe, I don't know.
You never know. It depends on how much of a good time you're having and how good you feel and your relationships. Yeah. You know,
It's
people
true.
get old and tired, you know? And what if we didn't have to be old and tired? Like lifestyle and diet and exciting ideas kept us alive. Kept us wanting to actually understand Alfred North Whitehead for real. Like, maybe you guys spend 60 years on that. And this would give us the opportunity.
I mean, that's what keeps me going most days. Like, there's so much to learn. Like, I want to learn literally everything I can. And I have to remind myself I should slow down a little bit because I have a lot of time. But, you know, after having an accident, I feel like I don't have any time. And so I try and cram it all in really quick, thinking that it could be done tomorrow. And, man, I didn't get to learn everything I wanted to learn. But
coming out of one of my breathwork experiences, the line was, I had that same attitude. It was like I really wanted to do everything, but the message that came out was hasten slowly. Like hasten. Like go for it. But
just go slow.
Go slow enough that your body can handle it. Your body and mind aren't getting pushed to the limits. Do it in a healthy way.
And patience is key. Knowing when you're ready to move on to the next thing. I mean, I think for my generation and maybe yours, but like, you know, just so entitled, just I want it now. Like I want to do it now. You know, I went to school. I got myself in a lot of debt. Like I deserve this job because like I paid for it in a sense, and like I know what I'm talking about. And it's like patience, you know, maybe you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, you spent a lot of money to do that and you dove in, but you know, yeah,
yours more than mine, but mine's still pretty bad.
Your patience?
My generation.
Oh.
Yeah,
we're
it's tough.
Close in age, so.
Close enough.
Yeah.
I think, what do they call yours?
We're millennials, I think, right?
It's a marketing term.
Yeah,
More than anything. How do we advertise to this age bracket? It's like, yeah. I think people in my generation don't necessarily, they kind of expect a lot of stuff, but I feel like most people are selling themselves short in my generation. That's my feel right now. Like, they're very talented, smart people, but they're just not necessarily going exactly for what they want. I find that a little sad.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I see that too. You know, you're really passionate about something, and then like I have a lot of friends that went to school for certain things, and then they never get into their field. They just get into a field because it pays well, and you know, it gives them benefits. I can't do that.
Right. It's complicated math.
It is.
All right, cool. Did I miss anything? Oh, the permaculture podcast is Permaculture Salad.
Permaculture.
The sports one that we didn't talk about that I'm about to launch is Flow State's podcast. No website yet. Probably buy that in the next couple days.
Cool.
Yeah, but I'm excited, man. I'm really excited to continuing this project and bringing this knowledge out and supporting people in their quest to engage in this stuff a little more.
Yeah, I think about just all the conversations and all the learning that we have ahead of us in this realm, and bringing community together, and who knows, maybe something cool will synthesize out of it.
I think so. All right, so thanks for taking the time to interview me. I appreciate it. This was really awesome.
Yeah, and thanks for all the listeners listening.
All right. Yeah, thank you everybody for listening, and more podcasts coming soon. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to psychedelicstoday.com. Hope you liked that episode. I had a really fun time being interviewed by Kyle. Really appreciate his time doing that interview, and looking forward to talking to him again soon on the next interview we do with a guest. So if you want to connect, feel free to reach out from our website. You can hit us up via email, info@psychedelicstoday.com. You can reach us on Facebook, Instagram, and leave us a review or subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher. Yeah, thanks for listening again. Really appreciate it. Share with some friends, and talk to you soon.